So, have you ever actually stopped to wonder what neuroplasticity, raising children, and teaching a brand new puppy all have in common? I know, it kind of sounds like the setup to a strange joke, right? But surprisingly, the answer unlocks the very foundation of how we as human beings interact with the world around us. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating set of handwritten research notes that strip away all the heavy complexities of psychology and instead leave us with the raw, biological blueprint of exactly how we acquire knowledge. To figure out how we truly learn, we have to look past the thick textbooks and examine the raw mechanics of the brain, exactly as the author of these notes has laid them out. We're going to journey through the physical processes of memory, the absolute immense power of our subconscious, and finally, look at an analogy that proves just how universal this entire learning process really is. The author actually anchors their whole exploration with this famous Einstein quote: "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." You know the one. But why start there? Well, because true learning is fundamentally about breaking old patterns and building new, foundational ones. It's about recognizing that if we want a different outcome, whether that's in a relationship, picking up a new skill, or teaching a behavior, we absolutely have to change the foundational input.
And that brings us right into Section 1, Building a Solid Foundation, starting with the basics.
Okay, let's dive into this. The author's notes make this explicitly clear. No matter what the topic is, absolutely all learning must start with the raw basics. They write, "Whenever you learn something new, the best way to start is the basics and set a solid foundation on which to build on and improve." They're charting out a strict chronological requirement for how the brain operates.
And this brilliantly illustrates the three exact steps the author identifies as the universal mechanism for acquiring knowledge. First, you start with the basics. Second, you set that solid foundation. And then, and really only then, can you extrapolate to fit new situations. You take those core principles, slightly adjust them, and apply them to explain and navigate entirely unfamiliar territory. This is literally how we learn, adjust, and adapt to any new situation life throws at us.
But how does the brain actually pull this off? Let's move to Section 2, the mechanics of memory, and look at how the brain actually stores data.
Moving into the biological hardware of it all, the notes ground this process in the science of neuroplasticity. The author defines it here in terms of quick neuroconnection strength. Essentially, your brain is never just static. It's continuously creating and strengthening pathways to adapt to whatever is happening around you. Your brain physically changes based on the basics you feed it, aiding your learning and adapting for the absolute best possible outcome.
A really fascinating example the author uses to prove this natural adaptation is how newborns instinctively know the mechanics of how to speak before they're ever actually taught. They'll react to sound based on entirely natural built-in pattern recognition. It's like the hardware is ready to go from day one, just desperately waiting for those foundational basics to be laid down.
So, where does all this data go? Let's explore Section 3, Subconscious Triggers and Patterns. You see, memory isn't just about what we actively try to remember. In fact, learning is most deeply rooted in our subconscious environment. There's a crucial distinction we need to make here. Our conscious recall, what we're actively trying to think about, actually has a surprisingly limited brain capacity. But our subconscious triggers, they have a massive capacity for retention. Conscious thought requires active, logical effort. Subconscious memory, on the other hand, is set off automatically, and it's built entirely on our environment. We're talking physical senses like smell, taste, and touch. Those physical senses heavily dictate our capacity to remember and, ultimately, to learn. And this perfectly explains the author's observation about early human development. We always say children are like sponges, right? They soak everything up through experience and association. Because kids lack pre-existing filters and deep life experience, they have this immense, almost limitless capacity to learn. But to actually grasp the world, they require association. They have to link a new piece of information to a sensory experience or a previously established basic. This deep reliance on association leads us right into Section 4, the dog training analogy, learning via association. Now, to show how similar learning is at a purely natural level, the author brings up animal training. The notes break down how teaching a dog commands relies entirely on the exact same mechanics of association. Dogs have a limited brain capacity for complex logic, so their learning relies heavily on those subconscious triggers we just talked about: environment, sound, and association. Think about basic commands for a second. Sit, stay, paw. The real magic happens when you start linking those commands together.
If you teach a dog to sit and stay simultaneously, you're effectively forcing their understanding of the word to change. You're incorporating more information via association, building a much more complex behavior out of the raw basics.
And that brings us to our final section. Section 5, Echoes of the Process. Universal Mechanics. I want to let this question land for a second. Is teaching our kids really any different? Look, there is sometimes a stigma that comparing human child development to animal training is somehow derogatory or insulting. But the author argues that if we look purely at the biological mechanism, we learn our kids exactly the same way. The answer is a resounding no.
Let's compare them side by side. Animal learning relies on basic commands built via associative, subconscious triggers. Child development relies on passing down core values and manners, built via the exact same associative basics. When we teach a child how to interact socially, how to share, or how to be a good friend, we aren't uploading a software program into their minds, we're using association to build a foundation.
The author explicitly points out that we pass down fundamental values like friendship to our children based entirely on these altered basics. We use our own life experiences to reinforce these behaviors. It is the exact same blueprint. Lay the foundation, use association, and extrapolate into complex social behaviors. The analogy at the end with the dog training is really just to show how similar learning is at a natural level, even like we'll learn our kids exactly the same way. It's not like a derogatory thing or seeing one as the other, both are simply echoes of the process. It's a beautiful, natural demonstration of how learning works on a fundamental biological level across species.
So, to summarize our journey through these notes, whether we're talking about the high-level neuroscience of neuroplasticity, the incredible sponge-like capacity of a child raising their hand in a classroom, or the simple act of training a puppy in your backyard, the mechanics remain exactly the same. The need for a solid, associative foundation is a constant universal law of nature. Knowing that learning isn't some magical trait, but a physical, step-by-step process of breaking old patterns and associating new ones, kind of changes everything, doesn't it? It puts the power right back in your hands. So I'll leave you with this. If the mechanics of learning are truly this universal, and your brain is designed to adapt, what long-held habits are you going to start rewriting today? Thank you so much for checking out this explainer, and I'll see you next time as we continue to decode the fascinating world around us.